Welcome everybody, and thank you for being on this Lunch and Learn as we look to navigate the workspace during these unforeseen times, uncertain times. We're in a place in the space now where we're dealing with multiple things at multiple times. Like some people have called it a double pandemic with COVID-19, as well as dealing with systemic racism, dealing with just police brutality. You name it, we're dealing with it. Financial burdens from loss of employment. We're dealing with death going on right now. So I thought this would be a great place and a great space to have a conversation for young Black professionals and Black professionals in general, focusing mainly in Northwest Arkansas, but those who are all over in our networks. And so for those who are on and are participating, just go ahead in the chat room, put your name and the organization that you're with. And if you want to even put down where you are. I know us here in Northwest Arkansas, but I know some friends who are logging in from Detroit, Michigan, as well as places in Maryland, places in Texas. So go ahead and put where you are as well. Really quickly, I'm gonna go over a few housekeeping rules, and then we're gonna get right after our panel discussion. There will be a Q&A session for the last 10 to 15 minutes of this Lunch and Learn. So there should be a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And so if you have a question, go ahead and drop those questions in there, and we'll take some of those towards the end of our session today. And then just to actually level set the expectation, this is more of a, how do we navigate as opposed to how do I deal with the emotions of everything? And so right now we have some great people who are talk from their fields of expertise about how we as young Black professionals can continue to navigate our workspace and continue to be successful, to continue to perform as we still have to deal with all that we're dealing with right now. If there's any technical difficulties with this panel, just hold on tight. Zoom does its thing, but we'll just keep on going from there. And so as I now get into our panel, we have 5 great panelists today. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves here in a moment. And so we'll just get started, and I'm very, very excited. The genesis of this entire thing came from a few of my colleagues saying, I'm back in the office and I'm being forced to have conversations about race that I'm not comfortable having, but I don't know how to either engage, disengage. I don't know where a safe space is at work. I'm not being successful, even though I'm being told I have to perform. And so all these things kind of culminated in the creation of this. And Dr. Todd Jenkins and I kind of came together and put this thing on so that we could have some type of dialogue that wasn't so much talking just about race, but how we can continue to move forward and continue to stay on our mission to grow our careers. All right, so first I would like to ask this question, and the first question also comes with an introduction of our panel. So panelists, I want you to introduce yourself and in one word, describe what the last 3 weeks have been like for you. I'll start with Kendra McRae.
Hi, I am Kendra McRae, and I am a mental health therapist. I currently work for Beacon Health Options, and what I'll be doing is there's a Walmart Health Center coming to Springdale, Arkansas, here in a couple of weeks. And so I'll be working at the Walmart Health Center as a mental health therapist there, and they'll be offering different services. I have a master's degree in social work. I graduated with a social work degree in 2015. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I graduated in 2011, and when I moved here to Fayetteville, I actually worked at the U of A. I worked in the counseling and psychological services center there for the years, made a new career transition. As far as my word for the past couple of weeks, I would say exhausting. It has been very exhausting. And that's like the only word that I could think of. I've been seeing it a lot. When I talk to my friends about it, my husband about it, it's exhausting.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Okay, so for Kendra, exhausted. Pastor Curtis Smith.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Curtis Smith, pastor of the historic St. James Baptist Church, HBCU grad, Grambling State University, master's in theology. And the word, I guess, that describes how I'm feeling right now, it has gone from exhaustion to hopeful. You know, I'm a person who tries not to be pessimistic about everything, even though there is so much hurt and pain that is going on. But I just believe I'm hopeful because there has been a significant shift in the country, and people can see exactly what is going on. You know, it's one thing to hear about certain things. We see certain things, but the beauty of what this is, COVID-19, has been both a curse and a blessing. Curse from the standpoint that people are dying and are sick, and that burdens me. But a blessing because everything is shut down, and now the whole world could see how people that look like me are dealing with the issues of blatant racism in this country. And so when I look out and I see folks coming together, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to learn, wanting to make a difference, I find that extremely hopeful. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm still hopeful.
Fantastic. Dr. Alicia Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I am Alicia Smith. I am the Executive Director of the Ideals Institute at the University of Arkansas. We are a training consultancy and research institute dedicated to creating diverse, equitable, and inclusive spaces within our workplace and our community. So we are designed for such a time as this. So the word I would describe, I have 3 words, I'm sorry. So I agree with Kendra that I'm exhausted. And it's been hectic. The last word is that I'm energized because now finally we have your attention. And so now we can have those really hard conversations we've been trying to have and create these business cases for a long time. And so now I think it's in some ways going to be easier to engage people in conversations that they were reticent to have before. And then of course the work is still difficult and still hard. So I got to eat my Wheaties and get my rest. But this is going to be an interesting time. So, and all the stuff about my bio you can find on ideals.uark.edu. You don't have to. I don't have to bore you with all that.
Sounds good. Dr. Ty Jenkins. Dr. Bowtie Ty Jenkins.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Jenkins here, Global Inclusion Leader at J.B. Hunt, as well as involved in several things. This really grateful for this platform for us to come together and have the conversation. How I'm feeling, I think Sister Deva put out a post and it sums up very well. It's like, I'm fine, period, and then terrible, and then crying, and then laughing, and then screaming, and then grateful, and then over it, then determined, and then terrified, and then anxious, and then happy, and then exhausted, all in the same minute. But I am yet hopeful because I know who I am and whose I am, and these conversations are worth having, and I can see that hope is all I can wake up every day to engage, to continue these work of changing the narrative here for us, for our community, and not only in the U.S., but the world that we live in.
Wonderful. And Kariq Claybrook.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Dr. Daniels and Dr. Jenkins, for pulling this together and inviting me to be a part of this conversation. My name is Kariq Claybrook, and I am a U.S. Communications Manager at Walmart Incorporated. What does that mean, really? We have over 4,600 stores. We have over 2.1 million associates here in the United States. And so really what that means is we're making sure that they have the right information so that they can keep themselves healthy and safe, but also our customers. And not just information to run our stores, but information about what they can be doing to better serve the communities that we operate in. As it relates to one word that could describe kind of these past 3 weeks, for me, it would really just be the word roller coaster. And I think everyone's sentiments, you know, feed into that word. I'm from Minnesota, and so the news was extremely difficult for me personally. My grandmother was driving home. She works in Minneapolis and was almost arrested by the police. They accused her of being a looter. My cousin was peacefully protesting and was hospitalized because the tear gas, she wasn't able to regain eyesight for a few days, and so her eyes had to be bandaged. Just being a leader, you know, locally serve as the primary advisor for the Delta Sigma Theta chapter at the University of Arkansas. So you have a lot of young people that are looking to you and looking for your leadership. And so just this roller coaster of trying to keep it all together, as the title of this session, navigating these spaces, but staying hopeful and remembering that there are so many people that have lost their lives fighting for this change. And there will be so many more people that will still lose their lives before this change actually happens. Just try to really keep focused on those people, because they have names and they have dreams and they have hopes that unfortunately won't be fulfilled. And so that keeps me focused and energized and excited.
So then let's get into this, because a lot of people are now, like myself, we're back in the office. And like many of us, we are the only person of color, the only Black person in our workspace, on our team, in our department, on our floor, you name it. Even there's people at home who are on Zoom calls, who are on constant meetings, on conference calls. And a lot of this has become a focal point of conversation. And so talk to us now, this is for everybody, talk to us now about the appropriate way and the appropriate forum to engage in race conversations with your team, and even with a supervisor, if that supervisor happens to be white. What is the appropriate way and appropriate forum? And that's for anybody who wants to tackle that.
I'll take the first stab at it, because there's no one right answer for this. Of course, that depends on everything. It depends on who your relationship with your supervisor, it depends on your team, it depends on you and what you're comfortable doing. I think it's certainly appropriate for you to just be honest. You know, how are you doing? I'm not okay. Or today I'm doing great, or whatever it is, and to at least begin a dialogue with your supervisor about what is actually happening, what this means to you. It could be that you have to do some educating. It could be that you all don't mention it at all and you are fine with that and they are fine with that. And so I guess my major answer is it depends, but whatever you're comfortable with. But I would say, especially as it relates to performance, which I know we're going to get to that later, being transparent about that. And if there need to be some adjustments made in your responsibilities, have those conversations early. And be really honest about that.
I would pan in and agree with Sister Alicia, but I would also say, from the standpoint of from being both part of the faith community as well as spending 14 years at Walmart, you know, I'm really thinking about Zora Neale Hurston's her quote is that if you're silent about your pain, they will kill you and say that you enjoyed it. And so I think it's important that those conversations take place, but take place in your own time. You're not obligated to have the conversation outside of your own time, so that we could somehow diffuse other people's guilt. And so I think the important thing is that those conversations are ultimately going to have to be had. But I think we have to be very strategic in terms of when we have them, so that our frustration won't overtake the conversation, but that we can speak truth to what we're feeling and hopefully get them to a place of empathy, then sympathy, then ultimately to action.
I'll add on to that. I was reading an article by Wesley Lowery, who's really been covering, you know, Black Lives Matter and the struggle of Black lives as a journalist professionally for well over 10 years. And I think he had a really great perspective of kind of what we're talking about. as he talks about these two different groups of people, right? Black Americans and white Americans. For many Black Americans, what's happened over the last 3 weeks is exhausting. As we've mentioned, right? You're seeing yet another Black body. But for so many white Americans, this may just be the moment that they're really awakening to this idea that this is the reality for people that they may work with or people that they may care about. And so you have these two groups of people who are intersecting at completely two different moments, understandings of what the world is and what it means. And so I think that in navigating those conversations, specifically in a corporate environment, just as you would in your personal relationship, just as you would in your relationship with your friends, you have to set boundaries. You have to know what you stand for and what you don't. Your leadership needs to know that, you know, and the more that you do that introspective work to really define who you are and what that means, you will find it much easier to navigate these conversations. That doesn't mean it won't be difficult. That doesn't mean you won't need to have those people that you can vent to, those people that you can really just say how you're into those professional spaces. But I can tell you from personal experience, it will get easier, not just easier, but you'll see the needle start to move and you'll see hearts and minds start to shift.
And so this word exhaustion has come up several times now. And so I want to take it to the mental health standpoint. And Kendra, I want you to look at this. And real quick for you, Kendra, when you talked before, it was kind of staticky. Is there any way you can test that out real quick?
Is it better?
A little bit. It's a little bit of static there, but we'll figure it out and deal with it now. But talk to me about the whole mental health piece, because we're not only engaging with our coworkers, but we're engaged on social media. We're engaged when we watch the news in the evenings, or however we consume our news. We're constantly being engaged, and so that engagement is fueling exhaustion, is fueling frustration. So talk to us now about the healthy ways of dealing with this exhaustion and frustrations, as a lot of us Black people here in this area are in majority white spaces.
Yeah, for sure. I think, to me, one thing that I think about is picking your battles. I think it's very important. I think a lot of times, just by nature, we take on this role of that we have to educate everybody, right? And that it's our responsibility a lot of times, that we feel like it's our responsibility a lot of times to educate our white counterparts on racism. But what we know is there are a wealth of information, and there's a wealth of resources available to them if they want to be educated on racism, and especially on systemic racism. So I think picking your battles and realizing that it does not have to be your role to be an educator while you're dealing with the trauma of this experience. Because it's really hard to deal with the trauma of the experience on a personal level and try to educate your white counterparts as well. That's a really fine dance, and that's a really hard balance to get to. So I think it's really important to think about that in ways of how can they get this education without me having to be the one that does it, because there's resources available for them, and we know that. And also, I think another very important thing to do is taking a break. I tell people all the time, rest is resistance. You know, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to rest. I think a lot of times in this work, we feel like if we take the time out, then we're not doing our part, right? Like, I have to be on all the time. I have to always be using my voice. But sometimes using my voice and my resistance is rest and taking care of myself. So I think especially in times like this, self-care is extremely important. And we have to put that at our priority list. And if we think about, okay, where is self-care on my list? If self-care is in the middle or at the bottom, we need to put that at the top, especially at a time like this. And we need to make sure that we prioritize that. I'm following people on social media who are spreading hate and who don't agree with the message of Black Lives Matter. Sometimes we have to like remove people from our space. And sometimes what's important is being able to protect our peace. And protecting our peace sometimes look like, you know what, I see what you stand for, so you can't be in my space. And even in my social media space. And so maybe I unfollow you. I may unfriend you. I may even block you if it gets to that point. Because what I'm looking at is this is long-term work. And in order for me to be able to endure, I have to take care of myself in such a way where I have to almost be really selfish. And part of that is saying, you know what, you can't be in my space. I'm not having that conversation with you. There are resources available for you to be able to get this information, because we can't endure without doing that. And so I think that's really important. In creating safe spaces, I really like the idea of having like Black spaces, Black solitude, people who understand who you can find support in. I think it's important to have those supportive environments and making sure that, especially in times like this, that you're utilizing that, because it's really hard when you're in white spaces all the time, to use your voice in that way, and you kind of have to, you're trying to test the room all the time. But when you're in Black spaces, you can kind of let down your guard a little bit more. You're a little bit more relaxed. So I think it's so important to have those spaces and to utilize.
Hey, Dr. Daniels, can I add on to something?
Yes, please.
I think it's also very important when we talk about exhaustion and mental health, and as well as, first, let me acknowledge that everyone shows up to this space very differently. And everyone stands up differently and fight things differently. And I want us to understand that people, even in our own community, fight this differently, and show up to the space differently. And I think it's also unfair but sometimes it can feel the pressure of everyone else is doing this, so I need to do this, and I need to repost, I need to be engaged, I need to go and do that. So I tell people all the time, find your calling in this and be okay with your calling in this, because your calling in this is nothing new to us on this call. Okay, so this is something that's been heightened. Okay, this is new to some white people, but it's not new to us. We may be awakening in certain educational pieces and pillars in our own community of learning our culture, but this is not new. Navigating these things are not new for us. However, protect yourself in how you want to show up for this, and understand your role clarity in the workplace and outside of the workplace. But depending on your position, depending on your status in the organization, you may have a different role to play in this. And I think you have to recognize that and respect that, as well as outside of work, you may have a different role to play based on your influence, but be comfortable with what role you want to take. And because at the end of the day, you have to go to sleep with what you did today. And I do agree with you. Take time for yourself and unplug from social media, unplug from a lot of these things. Unfortunately, we cannot unplug from the workplace. So when we're there, we still have to perform. And I tell people all the time, it's like, yes, we can, they may put us on they say, hey, I'm looking at my Black colleague, I want to hear your perspective. They want to learn, but it's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is come to do the job that you were hired to do. Because at the end of the day, and at the end of the year, when it's performance evaluation, I don't think they're going to come back to this moment and say, hey, I remember it was a tough time for you. And so I want us to be protective of our merit and grace. And I want to just really emphasize that is that we are navigating tough times. We're dealing with two pandemics. One the world recognized, and the other one the world is starting to wake up to. But take care of ourselves, and I just wanted to echo that what Sister McCray was saying.
For sure. And so moving away from, the need to engage or the need to disengage, we still have to stay on mission, right? We're all still trying to navigate our career. We're trying to advance. Many of us are seeking promotions, like people are seeking transitions in their career. And so the pain though happens when we all come to work and it's business as usual for everybody else, but we come in bearing the brunt of, Mike Brown, bearing the brunt of Trayvon Martin, bearing the brunt of Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. And now all of a sudden, we're having to continue to meet expectation, continue to perform as if nothing is wrong. So how do we navigate our environments and still need to perform, all in while still trying to have self-care, still trying to find safe spaces? And this is a question for everybody.
So if I'd like to jump in here as well, because you're right. I
Please.
mean, it's a matter of juggling so many things at once, and everything everyone has already said is so true. It's a both and. So we have to take care of ourselves, but we also have to show up at work a certain way. I would challenge us to take this opportunity, in light of the comments about, looking for opportunities to promote and work on our careers. Take this opportunity to shine. Right? So if there are ways that you can organize groups at work to demonstrate your leadership abilities, do you have ideas about how this moment can catapult your organization into the spotlight in a positive light? Or do you have some problem-solving ideas that have come to the fore? Or do you have ways that your organization can get involved that allows you to show up as the professional you'd like to be? That perhaps allows you to put forth some ideas that in another season might have been rejected. They might be ready to hear you now. Rethink that. So then that means that you're reframing your reality. It's like, okay, they talking about business as usual. I'm over here on this right here. And it could be a both and. It could be a win-win. And so there are ways that you can navigate this moment in such a way that 2 to 5 years from now, you look and say that was a catalyst. That moment right there was where, bam, this thing happened. So from a career management standpoint, it's a way to figure out how you can reprioritize and kind of get your organization moving. I know there are people who are starting brand new initiatives at their work. There are book clubs starting up. There are all kinds of race talks happening at work that would never have happened before. And so this could be an opportunity for you to shine and think about that. Of course, you got to take care of yourself in the meantime. Work still has to get done, but this could be an opportunity. So I'll let somebody else speak.
For me right now, I feel like organizations more than ever care about their image and the way they're portrayed to the media and the way that they look. And so I think that could be an opportunity to utilize that because we know that we're in a time that is so important. And, we see everybody releasing like their Black Lives Matter statements on their social media pages, and they're sending out their emails. And so I think now is a good time as far as staying on mission is to helping them to put action to those words and actions to those emails. And I think sometimes it may even take us asking the hard questions of, okay, so what happens next, right? Okay, we got an email. You release something on the social media page. Now what? And I think that's a really good way to help us stay mission minded, because I think, to me, what I think about is that organizations are going to do what they feel is best to help them look the best, right, during this climate, right? Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of this, right? Because there's going to be detrimental effects if they are. And so I think keeping that truth and that fact in mind and really thinking about, okay, what's our mission and where are you going to take it from further? And I think even that is self-care, because to me, I feel like a lot of times it kind of, you kind of feel a certain way when you get an email and you're getting social media messages, but you know that there's nothing else being done. And so I think part of that, even that self-care, is like kind of been asking the questions like, what's our next steps? Because their ears are open, and they're at a point in time where they realize like we got to be on the right side of this issue if we want to be successful.
While
Yeah,
we're on that conversation and speaking to all the different things that corporations are doing, I'm sure all of you, especially those that live locally, have seen the announcements that Walmart has made more recently. And if you haven't, they've committed $100 million to looking at how Walmart as a business can attack and address systemic racism. What I'll say to you is that this idea or notion of systemic racism, to Todd's point, isn't a new concept. But what is new about this initiative is that it allows us to look at as how a business we address those systems. For so long as a community and as a country, we have looked for government and policy and for local nonprofit organizations and faith-based organizations to lead this way. And we have forgotten of the power and influence that corporations like Fortune 1 have to move the needle in these systems and in these spaces. But what I want to, share with all of you is that none of these commitments that the company has recently made would have happened without the influence of Black voices. And that is why it's so important for us to be using our voices in this moment. It is so important, not just when in time of crisis, but throughout the year, so that when these moments happen and our leaders are ready to listen, then we can act and get real funding and real commitments to the change we so desperately need. And so, one thing that I've been speaking a lot with as relates to my team and just, our leaders at Walmart, I often reflect back on the civil rights movement. And there's something in particular that I always think back on. During a lot of the riots and the boycotts, there were lots of young white people that wanted to come and get involved, which we're seeing now, which is great and makes me hopeful. But during that time, those participants had to go through a training. And that training had some things that they needed to know, right? But 3 things that it included. Are you ready to be beaten up? Are you ready to be arrested? Are you ready to lose your life? As I'm having these conversations, I'm looking at how we hold corporations accountable. That's what I'm really asking people to reflect on. You're hurting now, you're in pain now, you're outraged now. But how much will you be willing to sacrifice? How much will you be willing to put on the line to see the real change happen?
That's good. Pastor Curtis?
Yeah, I was going to say, first thing that I would say is find a good Black therapist. Somebody that truly understands what you're going through and what you're dealing with, that can help you navigate through some of this process. And if you cannot find a good Black therapist, then certainly find someone who has worked with our community at length. But the other piece that I would say is that, right now the time is ripe for those who are working, as Carrie talked about, in the Fortune 500 or Fortune 1 companies as it relates to Walmart, to find an influential sponsor who can help you navigate through this process. Right now is not a good time for anybody to say no. And I think that we have to take advantage of helping them nurture and develop your career. And so there's just a ripeness right now where the attention, for better or for worse, is on us as African Americans. And so while the fire is hot, or the iron is hot, whatever you want to say, I just think it's a very good time to really deal with sponsorship in types of organizations to help you in developing your career and to moving up the corporate ladder, if that's what you choose to do. My background at Walmart was human resources and diversity. And I know these organizations have programs such as this, and whether it's social resource groups is one of the things that I started at Walmart. But I'm not sure how they are working these days, but I do believe that this is just the perfect time to challenge our organizations to ensure that people of color are on what we would call back then performance asset reviews, whereas you're part of the leadership, the future leadership of this company, and very specific in terms of roles with the company that you have. I think it's very important that it's great that we're investing $100 million into those things. And I think that corporations definitely have to be held accountable to do that. But part of that process, I think, is, and which I believe Walmart is doing, Carrie, is also working on hiring practices and other things to advance the careers of people of color. And we've got to hold them accountable to that. And we need to know what's next for us. We don't want lip service, but we want some very specifics as relates to what is going to happen to us in these specific areas that we work in, and not sit back idle. I am of the opinion, now I don't work for a corporation anymore, so my voice can say what the heck I want to. But working in that environment, I do recognize that you have to navigate through it a little bit, perhaps differently than me. But I think that ultimately in the end, if we do not hold them accountable to what they're saying they're going to do, then I am afraid that we would be back to this very same place in 5 years, and another $100 million would be invested, and there's absolutely no ROI on that. And we just want to make sure that the ROI on this is going to be people that look like us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so right now, I'd like to jump into the diversity and inclusion space. And I want to ask, what have these current events done to the D&I space, and how is it beginning to transform?
Yeah, so, from my perspective, I could speak on behalf of J.B. Hunt and some other organizations that I work with. The D&I space, this infrastructure has already been in place for D&I professionals. I think this space allows for that infrastructure to be strengthened or have more awareness of what's already in place. So I think, just like any other social events that shocks our nation, it goes back to and it retreats to those resources, right? It's interesting. It's like, well, did you guys do that training? Did you come to that training? Everybody wanted to do the training now. But these things are already in place, right? And so I not speaking on that on behalf of J.B. Hunt, just in general, D&I professionals been working towards things like this since the beginning. I will say, let me speak from this perspective, is that diversity and inclusion for corporate America has been a little more palatable, if you will, in the last 15, 20 years. And I'm not going to unpack this too much, but, a lot after the recession in 2002, a lot of the D&I roles got eliminated. A lot of the teams got shortened. Resources was, they were shortened and cut down due to what they call the Obama era, that people really believe that we have achieved this systemic issue. It was eliminated because a Black male was president. And so we saw a shift happen in the D&I narrative. And so now we started pushing from diversity to inclusion, which we all agree upon. But I will tell you, you cannot talk about true inclusivity without talking about equity and social justice. And I think what it has allowed for us to do is shift and reframe some of our conversations about not just anti-discrimination, but also anti-racism. And I think that is continuing to lift up some things that's embedded in our nation to have more of those thought conversations and awareness, but also accountability with behavior change. Because unconscious bias training is not going to is not going to change your behavior. So we have to work and look at this from an ecosystem standpoint, if you will, and approach it from all angles. And I think in our space right now, we're just continuing to uplift and strengthen, as well as ensure that we have sustainable plans. I want everyone to know we understand we're in the moment. but this is our situation. This is our life. This is our lifestyle, and it won't be fixed with a gift. It won't be fixed with a training. I mean, it's going to take some time, and I think I saw something in the chat about managing your expectations with your company, because you may be disappointed. We've been let down so many times before, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that this may be the change. But I just want you to also manage your expectation of your employer and also get engaged, get involved. But from the question at hand, the D&I space is right now is, you know, we're essential employees, and we have to continue to help our leaders understand and also search in their heart and in their head space. But most importantly, we're talking about your hands and feet. What are you doing? What are you doing to change the narrative? What are you doing in recruiting? What are you doing in hiring? What are you doing in promotion? What are you doing in career planning? What are you doing in the community? What are you doing when we're not in the room? You know, and so these are the questions that we're continuing to provide thoughts and resources behind. That's my perspective. Dr. Smith?
I agree, sir. You have captured it really well. I was definitely going to speak to the under-resourced state of many D&I spaces, right? So what COVID and the racial police brutality and the racial unrest has really brought to bear is that we don't have enough in place. We don't have enough of anything. And typically, diversity offices are woefully under-resourced. The things that we do accomplish is like amazing because we do it on a shoestring with some duct tape and some chewing gum and some volunteers, and we do amazing things. And so I think what this highlights, though, is what could we do if we outfit it like we outfit athletics? Or what could we do if we operated like we operate at the CEO suite? You know, like if all those resources were applied, you know, what could be possible? So I think this is bringing that to bear. Certainly equity is the conversation of the day for sure, because if you don't have that, you still aren't reaching where you need to go. And so that really includes a whole education about what is equity, how do we achieve it, what daily decisions do we make that either get us closer to equity or further from it. Do we even have an equity goal? You know, is that even on the table? Because if we don't have a goal, we're probably not going to reach it. And then if you start talking about anti-racism, that's new language for a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, there's a whole vocabulary that a lot of people need to acquire just to even speak intelligently about that and how we achieve that. And so I'm really happy to say there's a lot of movement in that area, a lot of conversations happening, and that's where a lot of it starts. But again, as Dr. Jenkins mentioned, you got to hit it from a lot of different areas, and everybody's voice, everybody's energy is required. You got to have all of it, and for a sustained period of time. So
Absolutely.
this is definitely our time.
Absolutely. And Dr. Smith, you talked about having like this being an opportunity a few minutes ago. And so this is the last question I have for the panel. For those who have Q&A type questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And so you talked about opportunity. The one thing I think is missing, especially in Northwest Arkansas, is the young Black professionals' ability to organize. I say that because a lot of us kind of come in and out of this area. We're very transient. We come in 2 years and we're gone. We come in, build relationships, and we're gone. And so those who have kind of come in, seen the issues, and ready to fight, they're now in different states and different areas. And so this question is mainly geared towards Pastor Curtis as well as Karee. I want to know, should Black young professionals be organizing? And of course, that's an obvious answer. But in an area where Black young professionals are so segmented in organizations, sorority fraternities, their family, like all this stuff going on, church, how do we organize in a place, in a space like this?
You're right. The obvious answer, at least in my mind, is yes. I think what's very important, though, is anytime organization takes place, we need to be very strategic in what we want our end result to be, right? Because I think if we just go out there and organize and protest with having nothing with a desired end, we're just out there screaming and losing our voices. And so I also believe that it's very important that as we do that, young Black professionals, that, you know, being able to identify allies that are able to really kind of help change the culture, because just your voice, as we know, you may be considered an angry Black voice. And sometimes I have learned this very quickly, and particularly being in the faith environment, and particularly now, because as you can imagine, every white church is calling us right now. What can we do? If I got to tell you what to do, then that's already a problem, number one. But the second piece of it is that you know, they have voices that can change. I can't go in Cross Church or any other church of that nature and change the narrative of that environment. But if I got allies such as that pastor could go in and become the voice because he is the shepherd of those sheep. It can completely change the narrative. So I think that this fight, although we've been fighting it appears by ourselves for so long, I think in order for real change to take place, we're going to have to get real allies that have influence to change the environment and the atmosphere. Because if we don't do that, then I think what we're going to do is continue to tire ourselves out in the process. So we have to be very strategic about that process and making sure that what is our end result was going to be, and make sure we get some strategic partners in the process.
What a great point about the importance of allies. I'll add on to that by saying power concedes nothing without demand. It never has, and it never will. And so to answer that first part of the question, is it important, should Black young professionals, and really just Black professionals in general be organizing? Of course, it's essential. I think there are great organizations. You know, I would be here all day if I listed them out, but I will call out the Arkansas Urban League Young Professionals, who have come up with a really strategic plan of not just, you know, kind of to the points of just going out and screaming, but what is the real action, and what does the next 30 to 60 days look like, and so on, and how can everyone do their part to kind of mobilize and move things forward. But what I'll also say is that demanding that things change doesn't always have to be done in large groups. And it doesn't always have to look like those traditional things. I'm sure many of you saw the article this morning. Bubba Wallace, he's the only Black NASCAR driver. And with everything going on, he spoke out. He doesn't like the fact that Confederate flags are waving as he's driving on the NASCAR racetrack. And if we can think about NASCAR for a second, this is an organization and an establishment that is pushed and supported ideas that do not support Black communities for a very long time. And the announcement came out this morning that they will no longer be waving the Confederate flags during the NASCAR races. And I say that to say that all of us, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're a developer, if you're in HR, if you're in community service, if you're in CD&I, no matter what you do, you are a part of a greater system that is impacting our people. And so look at the things that you do, the things that you're responsible for, the passions that you have, and find ways to use that influence and that power that you have, no matter big or small, to impact change and to ask people to do the right thing. And I think that Bubba is a really great example, right? Maybe not a conventional one, right? One, NASCAR, what does that have to do? How can they play a role in this? But a really great example of what we can all be doing from the seats that we're currently in, leading in a crisis, no matter what stage you're in.
Absolutely. And so Todd, I also know that you do a lot of organizing as well, at every level. And so if you could also chime in and talk about the importance of organizing at every level.
Yeah, so I like I said, I'm very strong advocate and understanding that people all have a role to play and everyone fight this differently. And it's an ecosystem that we need everyone collectively to move this. And specifically racism, to dismantle this, I mean, really, we need the allies. I mean, we we cannot eliminate a system that we didn't create. And so I think we have to be able to be a part of the change and understanding the values of every level as well, whether that's internally with your workplace or externally in the community. And so one thing I would recommend to everyone is to understand your area of influence and leverage that. It could be social media, it could be your workplace, it could be your community organization, it could be your church, it could be your friends, it could be your own family. And so it could be something that we got to do to be actively involved. And so understanding that I do believe in depending on your role in certain organizations and your influence, it may look different, but I do agree with what was said earlier, is that everyone has a voice and it's up to you to share it. And everyone has a story and it's up for you to share it. But you don't have to feel the responsibility that you need to share it. It's just totally up to you. And I really will say that get involved as well. I know I've been seeing some tension and some feedback of, generational differences of how we fight racism today, whether it's in a protest or going to the polls or voting. And, I've seen some of those things on social media, but I think all the above helps, right? We have local officials here. We need to show up to these meetings when we have town hall meetings. We need to show up to give our feedback. It's a lot of opportunities to get on commissions and get on committees and get involved. We need to be there, and we need to raise our hands and get engaged. And then the next piece that says, hey, Todd, I don't know about those opportunities. Well, we have to do our research as well. They're not gonna feed us these opportunities. Come on, somebody. They're not gonna feed us these opportunities if in that case we will not be where we're at today. So we're gonna have to, as a community, we're gonna have to do our research to understand who's representing us on policy, also who's representing us in the community, and if not, we need to be a part of that narrative to change the voice, and in our employer. Who's representing us, and are they representing us? Okay, are they representing us? And so I'm just going to leave that thoughts with you all to just think about who's representing us, and then maybe it's your opportunity to represent us and stand up. And I just say I really do believe that everyone has an opportunity here to get engaged and get involved. So I just leave it there. I just leave it at that, Joe. I don't want to get into unpack so much here, but I just think everyone has a unique opportunity.
Absolutely. Dr. Smith had the last word.
Wow. Okay. So really quickly, amen to everything that's already been said. A couple notes that I have here is that it's everyone's responsibility to do their own work. So to the point that was made earlier, and even in the Q&A where people are asking you for your take on this and your opinion on this, it's fine if you want to share your opinion on that. Make it clear that it's just your opinion. Also though, encourage that person to do their own work. Perhaps you point them into resources, and because we can't do the work for them. They got to do their own work. And we got to do our own work. So there are some Black people who are just actually realizing the depth of this situation as well. People come at this from a lot of different points on the continuum. So we all have to do our own work. The other thing is not just our own self-care, but caring for and checking in on those around us and our family. So it's really easy to get bogged down in this work and not really realize that you're neglecting other areas of your life. So it's important to take care of yourself and your families. Check in on people. I have really appreciated the texts and calls and the, just even the comments that someone would just even to take a moment to say, how you doing today? That's really helpful, especially in times like this. This can be very isolating, especially when we're social distancing or physically distancing anyway. For those of us who are not living with other people, this can be a very isolating moment where you can't just figure out where your tribe, you can't get to your tribe like you usually do. So I encourage us to really be intentional about taking care of each other and finding ways to engage. There's so much we can do here on this, but that career management is your job. You got to manage your career, and so figure out what that looks like. Mr. Rita said earlier, young professionals should consider what they want on the other side of this and not ask what's next. I really appreciate that comment, because that's the thing. we got to figure out where we wanted to go, and to the points that were made earlier about us organizing and us figuring out what it's supposed to look like. What are we shouting for? What do we want to see? Having those really hard conversations. And for those of us who are not quite as young as we used to be, we can be allies and helpful in this fight as well. So thank you for inviting a person such as myself. I ain't gonna call some other people on the phone out, but for me, thank you for including me.
Well, thank you all for being a part of this. Thank you for my panel. You guys have been great. You guys have provided great insight. And I just, I want to give a virtual hand clap to you all. You all have been fantastic. To those who are participating online, thank you so much for being a part of this. I hope this is helpful for you all as you continue to navigate your workspaces remotely or actually back in the office. This event was put together by myself and Dr. Todd Jenkins. I want to give Todd Jenkins a very, very sincere thanks for him and his team for helping us put all this stuff together, for getting the Zoom call set up, for getting this panel together as well. And I just want to continue to encourage you all to keep going. I know we're exhausted. I know we're tired. Like Kendra said, set boundaries, have some self-care. Like Pastor Curtis said, find yourself a good Black therapist or one who has worked with people like us overall, and just continue to fight this battle because we have a lot of work to do. But if they're going to unleash all this money and opportunity, we need to be the ones to take advantage of it. So thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day. This program was sponsored by Build Community Love. And so watch out for more programs that it has moving forward. Thanks again, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.